woman who burned the sky, the silent arrival in the distant future, when Earth had already scarred its skies with steel towers that scraped the clouds and cities that pulsed with endless neon light. When humanity had stretched itself into the void yet still struggled with hunger, division, and the aching weight of survival. Something entered its atmosphere unlike anything seen before. Not a fleet or a machine of conquest, but a single figure descending in silence. Her form wrapped in a shimmer of fractured starlight. And when she emerged from the ruins of a burning capsule that fell into the outskirts of New Shanghai, the people who gathered thought for a moment that she was nothing more than a fragile woman lost from a masquerade. A vision of delicacy wrapped in a short silver dress that clung to her like light clings to water, torn at the edges as though it had traveled through fire. And though her eyes glowed faintly with an otherworldly resonance, her steps faltered as if she were weak, her hands trembling as she tried to rise. The dust of earth clinging to her flawless crystalline skin, and the crowd whispered not of gods or warriors, but of a refugee. Some poor wanderer fallen from a place beyond the stars, too delicate for the rough streets of the human world. She gave no name at first, only looked at them with wide burning eyes that seemed filled with both terror and yearning, and the humans, curious but cautious, brought her into their midst, unaware that she carried within her a history as vast as galaxies and powers that could tear mountains apart. To them she was Valera, the alien girl who spoke softly and dressed like a fragile dream, and she smiled like someone who had nothing, eating the food they gave, sleeping in the corners they offered, listening more than speaking, her presence so quiet that many forgot she was even there. Yet in the shadows of her silence she watched everything, the flickering lights of human cities, the tired faces of workers returning from neon-lit factories, the children playing in the cracked streets, and she felt something stir in her heart that her people had never known, the ache of mortality, the rawness of imperfection, the beauty of a species that stumbled but refused to fall. And though she could have reshaped their world with a thought, she chose instead to bow her head, to hide her resonance, to let them believe she was poor, helpless, broken, because in that disguise she finally touched something real, something that even her own kind had never felt. And as the days passed, whispers spread across the settlements, whispers of the alien woman in the short torn dress who looked weak yet carried an aura none could name, who spoke with a gentleness that could still a room, who seemed to see into the souls of those around her. And while the humans pitied her and some mocked her, there were a few who sensed that beneath the trembling hands and lowered eyes lived something vast, a secret that could not be contained forever. And Valera herself knew that this fragile peace would not last, for the universe had never stopped hungering. And though she looked like a poor girl lost among the streets of Earth, she was, in truth, the last ember of a civilization devoured by the swarm, carrying a fire that could either save this world or consume it. In the weeks that followed her strange and silent arrival, Valera became a quiet figure woven into the daily life of the settlement. And though she looked like someone who had lost everything, a refugee draped in nothing more than her torn short silver dress, the humans began to notice the strange way the air around her seemed to hum when she stood too long in one place, how lights flickered in the corners of rooms when she passed, how machines sometimes faltered or healed themselves when her fingers brushed their surfaces. And though she would always lower her eyes and pretend to be powerless, they could not ignore that something within her was not ordinary, that beneath the fragile image of a girl too, poor to own more than the clothes on her back, lived something vast and unexplainable. Valera herself never spoke of where she came from or how her capsule fell, for to tell the truth would be to unravel the disguise she needed. Instead, she let them believe she was broken, that she was dependent on their kindness, that she had no strength of her own. And in that deception, she found herself watching humanity in ways that fascinated her. The way mothers shielded their children even when they had nothing to give. The way workers shared food with strangers though they themselves were hungry. The way laughter still bloomed in alleys filled with poverty. And she thought to herself that humans were perhaps the most powerful species she had ever seen, not because of weapons or energy, but because of their refusal to let despair define them. Yet there were moments when her facade slipped, when a man attempted to strike a child in anger, and Valera's eyes burned briefly with a light that froze him mid-motion, leaving him shuddering as though he had glimpsed eternity. Or when a machine at the factory caught fire, and she, without moving, seemed to pull the flames back into the steel until the blaze vanished. And though she insisted it was luck or coincidence, whispers grew. Whispers of the alien girl who wore the torn dress of starlight and carried no money, no tools, no family, and yet seemed to hold a weight greater than any human had known. Some called her a spirit, others a weapon, but most dismissed her as a poor lost wanderer until the day soldiers came to the city, armored and cold, searching for something not human, something fallen from the skies, and Valera felt the weight of their gaze, the tremor of their footsteps shaking the ground. And in that moment she knew her time of hiding could not last forever, that soon humanity would learn the truth of the helpless girl they pitied, and that her choice would decide whether she remained one of them or revealed the fire she carried within, a fire vast enough to burn or to save entire worlds. Asterisk, the soldiers who marched into New Shanghai's fractured streets were not ordinary peacekeepers, but men and women hardened by war, armored in plated suits that hummed with their rifles glowing with blue plasma cores, their helmets scanning every corner for signatures of energy that did not belong to Earth. And though the citizens watched from doorways with weary silence, Valera felt every step vibrate through her bones, every mechanical hum scraping against the resonance she kept buried deep inside. For she knew they were not here for the city or its people, but for her. She sat quietly in the marketplace, her torn short dress fluttering in the polluted wind, her hands folded neatly in her lap like a figure out of place, a fragile ornament among stone and metal. And when the soldiers' scanners swept across the crowd, they faltered upon her, not because they saw power, but because the readings around her came back broken, fractured, as though something inside her was not only alien, but deliberately hidden. A commander approached, his boots heavy, his eyes cold, and demanded her name, her origin, her purpose. Yet Valera only bowed her head, speaking in a soft voice that trembled like any refugee, telling them she had nothing, she was no one, that she fell from the skies by accident and wished only to survive. And though the crowd murmured in her defense, the soldiers were not convinced. That night, as the soldiers camped in the heart of the settlement, strange events began to unfold. Machinery around their vehicles sparked and died without cause. Power cells drained to emptiness. Comlinks buzzed with static when Valera walked nearby, and though she never moved against them directly, the men grew restless, whispering of curses and spirits, their commander sharpening his suspicion until he ordered her seized. The people protested, shouting that she was harmless, too poor to even clothe herself properly, too delicate to fight. But when they tried to drag her away, something happened that none could explain. The ground itself seemed to tremble as her eyes glowed faintly, a resonance spilling into the night like the echo of 1,000 forgotten voices. And though she quickly lowered her gaze, feigning weakness, the soldiers staggered as if struck by a force greater than any weapon. Valera's disguise as the helpless alien girl in a short dress had held for weeks, but now cracks spread across it, and she realized with a heavy sorrow that she could not remain invisible much longer. Somewhere beyond the stars, she could already sense it, the Calrec swarm, stirring, searching, their hunger driving them toward Earth as they had driven them to devour her people. And though she wanted to remain hidden among the fragile and beautiful chaos of humanity, she knew the shadow was rising again, and that when it came, she would either have to reveal her truth or watch this world burn as hers had. The night after the soldiers tried to seize her, the air above the city cracked with thunder, though no storm had formed, and the people of New Shanghai looked up to see a strange shimmer across the stars, a ripple in the heavens like a wound spreading through the fabric of space. And Valera felt her entire body tighten as though the universe itself had gripped her. She knew this was no storm, no natural event, but the first whisper of the swarm, the same shadow that had consumed her world and left her people in silence, the predators that fed on resonance and life itself. And though the humans only saw a strange aurora spreading like veins of black fire across the sky, she recognized the hunger in it, the calling of something that would come for her and for them. The soldiers panicked, their scanners screaming with unreadable signals, their machines failing one by one as the ripple grew. And many among the citizens turned their eyes to Valera, the fragile alien girl who had once seemed helpless in her torn short dress, who had walked like a refugee among their streets, and now stood in the square as though she alone understood the sky. She wanted to remain silent, to keep her secret buried. But when the ripple tore open and a spear of black lightning struck the ground at the edge of the settlement, setting half the district ablaze, the screams of children and the chaos of fire tore something inside her, and for the first time she stopped pretending. She raised her trembling hands, the silver threads of her dress catching the glow of the flames, and her eyes burned like small suns as she pulled the fire back upon itself, bending its energy into her palm until the blaze collapsed into silence, leaving the crowd stunned, the soldiers frozen, and Valera herself shaking with the effort of using only the smallest fraction of the power she carried. Whispers swept through the streets like a storm. Some cried that she was a savior, others that she was the very cause of the attack. But none could deny what they had seen, the poor alien woman was not powerless, and whatever lived behind her fragile smile was something vast and terrifying. Valera, heart aching, lowered her gaze again, speaking softly as though ashamed. "I did not want you to see me. Not like this. I only wanted to live as you live." But the humans could not turn away. For even as she spoke, another ripple spread through the sky, larger, darker, heralding the arrival of what she feared most. And they knew then that the strange woman who hid in their city was the only one who understood the enemy that was coming. The sky above New Shanghai ripped open like shattered glass, and from the wound poured the swarm vast living ships of black carapace and burning veins, descending not like machines but like predators, their hunger vibrating across the city in waves of soundless terror. And the humans, who had once laughed at Valera's fragility, now stood frozen as the very stars seemed to fall upon them. Soldiers fired their weapons, citizens ran screaming through the streets. Towers collapsed as the first blasts tore through steel and stone. And amid the chaos, Valera stood at the heart of the square, her torn short dress shimmering like a fragile piece of silver cloth in the storm, her eyes glowing with a fire she had buried for too long. She had wanted to be poor, helpless, small enough to hide among them. But now the truth could no longer be caged. She was the last ember of a civilization consumed, a vessel of power vast enough to challenge the swarm itself. With a single breath, she released her resonance, and the air around her shook as if the world itself were a crystal struck by a hammer, sending waves of light through the streets. Soldiers and citizens alike fell silent, watching as the flames of war bent away from her, as the black ships staggered in their descent, as reality itself seemed to hum in her presence. Yet Valera's strength came at a cost. Every spark she released was a fragment of herself. Every wave of power dimmed her crystalline body, and she knew she could not fight forever. She looked upon the humans, these fragile beings who had taken her in, as nothing more than a refugee, and she smiled, whispering that their strength was not hers, that their power was in their will to endure, their ability to suffer and still rise, their courage to live without perfection. Then she raised her hands one final time, her dress whipping in the wind of collapsing skies, and she poured everything she was into a single note of resonance, a soundless wave that lit the heavens like dawn, tearing through the swarm with a brilliance that turned night to day. The alien predators screamed and burned, their hunger silenced as their great hive ships crumbled into dust. And when the light faded, the city stood trembling but alive. Valera herself knelt in the ruins, her glow dimmed to almost nothing, her silver threads now dull and torn beyond repair. And she whispered with the faintest smile, "Now you will live, as I could not." The humans rushed to her, some weeping, some kneeling as if before a goddess. But she only lowered her eyes, still carrying the gentleness of a poor wanderer. And with one last flicker of light, she faded into silence, leaving behind no weapon, no monument. Only the memory of a fragile alien woman in a short dress who had come to them helpless and powerless, and in her suffering had given them the greatest gift, the chance to survive.